This video gives an overview of workload monitors in dashDB local. Here we are going to use the dashDB local console to view the available workload monitors, i.e. the ones that come by default with the instance. We do this by going to the Administer Workloads panel. We can create our own workload monitors by using the Add drop-down box at the top of the panel, and here we can see the various options that are available to us if we wish to create our own workload monitor. Before going on any further, I would like to point out one of the interesting options that are available with the Create Workload. By default, as you can see here, we have the Collect Activity Data on Coordinator with Details. Now we have an option here in the settings to change that behavior by disabling the ability of the SQL to generate the Collect Activity Details. And here you can see once we have changed that behavior, we have a different SQL command generated. Now this is important to note, as you only need the Collect Activity Data to see a full statement history. You don't need to set Collect Activity Data if you only want to see the workload metrics shown in the Overview Monitoring view. Now we will return to creating a workload monitor of our own. In this case, we're going to create a new workload monitor using the Session Authorization ID. The SQL to create the new workload monitor is generated for us, and all we need to do is go to the Run panel to complete the process. Once that is successful, we can see the new workload monitor, and you can see here that it is automatically enabled. This allows us to choose the monitor workloads from the left-hand side of the home panel and see a visualization of the metrics that are collected, in this case for the database overview. In addition, you can see here that we have the SQL execution, the various reads, CPUs, and transaction rates. Now we'll go and take a look at the workload monitor that we created earlier on, and you can see how we get a much more simplified view of the metrics. In addition, we can adjust some of the metrics that we collect depending on what we want to see in our workload monitor. There are a number of options to enable us to customize the workload monitor. Now we're going to run some SQL to see the effect this has on the metrics and visualization in the workload monitor. You'll notice that there has been no change, and that's because the refresh rate is set to every 60 seconds. As you can see, we have various options into how often we want to refresh the visualization, or we can run a manual refresh. Now we're going to look at another feature of creating workloads. When you choose to create a new workload, many of the options create sample workload definitions based on current monitoring data. For example, here by application name has looked at the history of applications that connect to the database and created sample workloads for each of those applications. So now we're going to rename the monitors that we've been given, and we'll see them in the following list. And what we'll notice in the following list is that work 1 and work 2, if we choose either of those or both of them, they haven't been enabled. So now what we're going to do is enable work 1, and we do that by hitting the Enable Collect Activity Data tab, and that generates the SQL command. When we run the SQL command, you can see from the log that we have now got work 1 active. So we're now going to switch to the display of the workload monitors, and in the drop down box we'll see that work 1 and work 2 are now available to us. But we're going to choose the sys default user workload since I've been running some SQL previously, and here we can see the metrics that are available to us. Now these metrics are only applicable to the single workload. What we can do is look at an aggregation of all the active workloads, and here we can see how on the top we get the overview, but on the lower displays we can see not only the aggregation but individual workload monitor values. Now, if you want to see detailed statement history, we select the history mode and then statement and individual execution, and here we actually see the statement. And what we can do, if we choose in a particular statement, we can also explain it, which is extremely useful since we have a list of all the individual statements that are executed, and we can investigate any that look out of the ordinary. You can find more learning resources in the dashDB Learning Center.